Hello,
Okay.
everybody. Welcome to Just Among Friends. I'm Lori Hines and Mike Isley coming to you today with another episode of our new show, Just Among Friends, where we hope to educate people, specifically Christians, on the importance of loving the Jewish people and the land of Israel. So before we get started with what we're going to talk about today, I want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors. Let me do a quick screen share. Here we go. All right. So since we're here at this screen, I'll just share with you, Mike is the founder of Texans for Israel, and I'm the founder of A Taste of Israel, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Our sponsors for Just Among Us are my friends Ann Stacey with Texans for a Safe Israel, and Mike Isley, and myself. I also want to do a quick announcement of our upcoming speakers so that you'll be aware. Next Sunday and the following Sunday will be Addie Badine, who is a Yad Vashem Holocaust educator, speaker, and a VIP tour guide. She'll be joining us live from Israel on Sunday, April the 4th and the 11th at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Then the following two Sundays, we will be hosting Pastor Mark Biltz of El Shaddai Ministries, author, speaker, and pastor. He also will be joining us at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time live. If you have joined us in the past, please use the same Zoom link. It'll be the same Zoom link. You don't need to get a new one. It'll be the same one. All right, so let's get started. Today, we are turning inward to our own to use this time to share with people who are watching this. If you're watching this recording, we thought it would be a good idea to share our own personal stories of how we even got to this place. Because Mike has his own nonprofit that stands with Israel and the Jewish people. I have mine, and Stacey has hers. But we came together a few months ago and decided to join forces. So I'm going to start. I'm going to ask Mike a few questions. He's going to tell his story, and then I'll follow up with my story. And the story is, how did we become so obsessed with Israel and the Jewish people with no intention whatsoever to proselytize? Or we just love them, and we want to learn from them, and we want to be friends with them. And so, I just have to kind of do a disclaimer of another reason of why we are so passionate about this. And before we get to your story, Mike, is that for, years and years and years, thousands of years, the history of proselytizing Jews and even forcing conversion has led to horrific human events in human history. And we are not those people. We are on the opposite side. We are trying to, like my friend Ian says, change the direction of the ship and be friends. We have a lot to learn from them. So welcome, Mike. It's fun to hang out with you today. How are you?
Lori, it is a joy to be here. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's our favorite topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fun. Well, I'm not sure when I first met you. I know I've met you on this path of loving Israel and the Jewish people. But I guess the last time I ran into you was that really sparked our friendship was in DC at a conference. I think it was APAC. We were at a side street going to a Judea and Samaria conference that was held in APAC. We ran into each other on the sidewalk.
And after that, there was a lot of fun connections, so that was great. Yeah.
Here's our path. We've crossed and here we are. Okay, well, Mike, how I normally like to start off these interviews, which is asking people their personal story of how they first became friends with Orthodox Jewish people with no hidden agenda, and how they first came to love the land of Israel. So the mic is all yours. Why don't you tell us your story?
Okay. Well, Lori, this is kind of fun. I haven't done this in a long time, so I will tell y'all, I am an only child to two great parents. And when I was born, I was very premature. And Mike Isley weighed 2 pounds and 15 ounces. Now, this was in the 1800s when that was very dangerous. Not really. I'm not going to share my age, but I'm old. So my mother used to always tell me, Mike, you're a miracle. And I'd go, yeah. Well, so anyway, I always loved God, I think, but I grew up in Texas, in the panhandle of Texas, and I kind of, my parents went to Polk Street Methodist Church. So I brought some show and tell things to tell you how I became a lover of Israel.
Okay.
When I was in Sunday school, and I know I was 3 or 4, here is Mike Isley's little book that he made. It's tattered and torn because it's old.
A little bit
but
more.
Let me show you a picture here. Here's a picture of the Old Testament biblical characters, and it says Baby Obed. And this was kindergarten lesson pictures. And then here's another picture of Peter shares his boat. Look at this. There's Jesus in the boat. Do you see how?
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So I found this book, and I've always remembered I had this book, but my mother never threw anything away. So God allowed me to find this, and all the crap one day I was throwing away. And I remember telling the Lord, and probably my mom, one of these days, I'm going to go to that land where these people live. And I remember these pictures of, just here, it was probably Sunday school or vacation Bible school. I made this.
Wow.
And so I remember doing that. And then, so let me just quickly tell you the quick story. So I always loved Israel. And how this kind of started is that when I was in high school, I became friends with some older guys and gals, and we had a Bible study in the summer. And these friends of mine, one of my good friends was Larry Latham and Robert Bauman and Vance Isler. Well, after high school, we went to Amarillo College, and they were a little older. Then they went on to University of Texas. And what I remember is that Larry and Robert went to Israel in the 70s after the 6-Day War.
Wow.
And they were on a dig with Dr. Roy Blizzard.
Wow.
From the University of Texas. And they came back and told me all about Israel. Well, that started going, well, if they can go to Israel, I can go to Israel. And so, but how the Lord works, I went to Amarillo College, and I'm one of those guys that went to a lot of universities, and I still don't know what I learned. But I went to West Texas A&M. It was called West Texas State. And so, I decided one of these days I'm going to go to Israel. So I think I became a believer. And I was always a Christian, in church, but Campus Crusade and the Navigators and all that. That's how I remember the day and the time and the hour that I became a believer in the Lord. So there's a miraculous story about a friend of mine that called me one Saturday night and said, Mike, I'm going to go play the piano at this doctor's house on Sunday morning. Go with me. Well, that was the start of what's called Trinity Fellowship in Amarillo, Texas. Okay. Trinity Fellowship is now a mega church in Amarillo, 10,000 people. And Trinity Fellowship started Gateway Church in South Lake, Texas. That's wow. How, so I was kind of one of the original 20 people. How did that happen? Well, there was a guy that came over from Lubbock, and his name was Curtis Stockton. Well, when Trinity, became a church in the early 80s, he said, I'm going to take a tour to Israel. And I said, well, I'm going. And so in 1980 or 81, I took a tour with the first group at Trinity Fellowship. We went to Israel.
Wow.
Unbelievable. And like we always say, Lori, I got off, back then, we didn't fly into Tel Aviv. We took a bus from Jordan over the bridge to get into Israel.
Wow.
I mean, back in the day, this was when They didn't have ice. It was terrible. And, it was great. So that was my first trip to Israel. Changed my life. Changed my life.
Wow.
And we went all over, and Curtis was ahead of his time. He would be one of us, Lori. He was just a great lover of Israel, learned Hebrew,
Wow.
and he's passed away, and his sweet wife is a very good friend of mine.
Wow.
So anyway, that's kind of how my first trip to Israel,
well,
and that started this whole thing.
That's so amazing. And hearing your story, thinking how much Israel has changed and modernized. But I have to say something, because our audience is a mixture of Jews and Christians. So I want to speak to our Jewish friends for just a moment. All right. So if you've hung in there this long, thank you. We Christians also play our own version of Jewish geography, because when I'm around my Jewish friends, they always make these connections of who connected them to who, so we do the same thing. So thank you for listening to our version of that, because people matter. People who connect you matter. Those connections matter. And this is where these connections led to. Here we are today. And so it is a powerful statement to pay homage to your friend who was ahead of his time. May he rest in peace. So here you are.
And let me tell you, let me tell you how I became friends with my Jewish friends.
Tell me.
My dad worked for what's called a credit bureau. And when I was little, in Amarillo, Texas, where I'm from, all the Jews were merchants. And a credit bureau is how today it's like Equifax, and so all the Jews who had retail merchants, my dad some days would take me with him, and I met all the Jews. And my mother played bridge with the Jewish ladies at the Jewish Country Club. And I from a little age, I started meeting Jews. It was crazy. And, I didn't know all I knew was I just love these people to death. I just love. And so that's how God worked that in my life. So let me tell you how it all really started. And through my years in high school, and one of my good friends, a Jewish girl, invited me to my first Passover when I was a junior in high school.
Wow.
I didn't even know what I was going to. And then I started meeting. I had most of these were Jews that were not Orthodox, but they were Jewish. My best friend was Stanley Herring in high school, Herring Furniture, So anyway, time goes on. So let me tell you what's happened in the 90s. I went to Israel many, many times. I've probably been 30 times. Who knows? I've had a lot of passports. And so I would go to Israel with groups and blah, 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 blah. So later on in life, my dad died of a heart attack. And my mother, I took care of my mother the last year of her life. And so after that happened, one night I used to watch, after this all happened, I was grieving. And I used to watch Zola Levitt at 12 o'clock at night, every Sunday night. Well, one night, Zola Levitt had this Israel soldier on. And underneath it said, Jeremy at thelandofisrael.com. And I wrote that down, and I watched this show, Jeremy being interviewed by Zola's wife's son. And this was years ago, and I emailed email was kind of new, and I emailed, and I said, so I went on this tour with this group. They had one seat left, and I told Jeremy Gimpel, I'm coming to Israel. Could we meet? So I flew to Israel with this tour, and we were in the Dan Panorama. And one night we had set up where Ari and Jeremy were going to come and meet me. So after dinner, I was sitting there. I was sitting there, and they came in And the people at the front wouldn't let them in because they weren't part of our group. And I went over and I said, let these people in. These are my friends. And they said, well, they're not in your group. And I said, well, they're my family. And, we'd never met. Well, they are my family now. Yeah. So Ari and Jeremy, we talked, we went to a room, and this is how this started. That night, we didn't have anything to do. And all my group came in and listened to Ari and Jeremy talk. This was probably 2006.
Wow.
And so after they talked to us, everybody loved them. And so we stayed up till about 1 o'clock, just Ari and Jeremy and I talking.
Wow.
And that started this wonderful relationship with Ari and Jeremy. And that's how I met, which is a divine intervention. Mm-hmm. How would, by email, how did that happen?
Yeah. And so that's how night watching Zola Levitt. The fact that Zola Levitt had Jeremy on his show is in itself phenomenal.
Yeah, back in 2000, the early 2000s. So.
Wow.
So that's how I met.
Well, I have to say, it's been amazing to hear your story. I've heard it before, and it is remarkable because that just doesn't happen. I know many people who've gone to Israel, and that kind of stuff just does not happen.
And let me share one thing, and that's why we have Texans for Israel. That's why all this started, because Ari and Jeremy introduced me to all their Orthodox Jewish friends, and that's how I love the Jewish people. And because of them, that has opened up. And then I went to Kufi, blah, blah, blah. So you know how this works. So that's how Mike Isley is the person he is today because of that. So
Don't you have a picture you want to show of your first Shabbat dinner with Jeremy and his family?
This is my first time to be, this is my first Shabbat meal in Israel in 2006 with Ari and Jeremy and all their family. And this is Rachel and Simcha Gluck. Ari, the wife, Ari just had 2 kids. And so that was that. Yeah. So that's a remembrance. So
that's amazing. Well, and even to fast forward to today, how that relationship has evolved and grown into what your efforts now, which is your nonprofit called Texans for Israel that you mentioned just a few minutes ago. This is how it started. Since then, I want to take a minute and tell our listeners what you're doing with Texans for Israel. You do lots of things, a lot of educational things, advocate work, on the political level, the cultural level, the spiritual level, but you also have funded several things. One is the documentary I Am Israel, which is a film that documents Israel and local people who are in the land, local Jewish people.
I became friends with Tommy Waller years ago, and Tommy has opened up many doors, but that's how I met our friend David Kern, who is a filmmaker. So we love David and everything he does. So we supported one of his movies, I Am Israel, which everybody needs to watch. Yes. And then, David is now friends with Ari and Jeremy and everybody. And so we did another film about their new farm in Judea.
Okay, I want to talk about that farm. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I have been to their farm, which is called the Aragot Farms in the Judean Mountains, the southern tip of the Judean Mountains near the Dead Sea. But you were pivotal and very instrumental, in helping them get the information out about what they were doing. They were given this vision to settle this area that no one was living in. It was barren mountains in the Judean area, and you helped them produce a film about that. I think it was titled Ascend the Mountain with Rabbis Ari and Jeremy. And
yes.
You can find it on YouTube if you Google that or search for that. But it was the precursor to their story about the Aragot Farms. Tell us about that.
Well, I kind of lived with Jeremy and his wife for a month or two in Israel. And many years ago, I've been many times to see Ari and Jeremy. And so we're family. We're family. So one time, they were doing a show called Tuesday Night Live in Jerusalem, and my good friend Larry Latham and I, we helped them to do that, which gave them a world platform. It was the first Jewish and English show. But Ari and Jeremy have always had this vision. Before I knew them, they were going teaching Torah. And now, they wanted to teach Torah to non-Jews like me or to the nations. Well, here's Mr. Nation here. And so we just got to be on the kind of the early times with them. It's such an honor to know them, but I don't know what my life would be without them. But so that I was on an APAC trip to Israel, and they called me and told me all about the farm. So that's when David had done I Am Israel, and then David was in Israel, and so he went to the farm and did this beautiful movie about how that all happened. So we got to document that.
Wow.
And so anyway, it's just how the Lord is. When you're in Israel, it's like the Lord just downloads, and it's like when you're walking down the street, he'll say, Mike, turn left, Mike, turn right. I'm documenting all these stories in a little book. I don't know who's going to buy the book, but maybe someone will.
I'll buy it.
But there's so many great stories about just my life with Ari Jeremy and Tommy Waller and all these other great people that we know, that all these wine people that make, like Jacob Berg, and how did Ann and you and me, how did God take this? We didn't even know each other, but we have this story now of God has just blessed us. So we love the Jewish people, and now I study Torah.
It's amazing.
And so I'm a different person, but that's my life now.
Well, Mike, I have to say what you just said is so important. It needs to be highlighted, because you said I'm a different person. My life is much better since the Jews have come into my life. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say that, people that have the same vision that you and Ann and I have seen. We've seen it with our own eyes. We've experienced it. And I too can stand shoulder to shoulder with you and tell you that my life is much better, much richer, has more meaning in it since I have become friends with Jewish people. It is not by accident. So I really echo what you're saying, and I understand it. It is the most beautiful thing ever. Yes, it is so, my life is different too. So I really love hearing your story. Before we go over to my story.
Time for your story.
Yes, we're going to go there. I'm like you, I have so many, right? You just have so many. There's a famous, there's a common thing that Pastor Martin Bilt says. When it comes to Israel and the Jews, there's always more. I mean, it's always so much. And someone else says, going to Israel is like drinking from a fire hose. And I think there's so much coming at you. So good. It's so good. Well, I just I'll take this time to tell you my story. Again, it was a life-changing story. And I grew up a Christian, and I really was not aware of Israel until the mid-2000s. Much to my shame, I don't have the history that you have. But when I realized, when I started really becoming a stronger Christian and studying the Bible more, I guess, I had it in my heart, I wanted to go to God's hometown. And I used to keep a journal, and I would say in my journal, I wanted to go to God's hometown, which is Israel. And the opportunity came up, and I was able to go. But I must put a marker here and have a disclaimer. I consider my life in two segments: before I went to Israel and after I went to Israel. Two different lives, two different perceptions and perspectives, and different outlooks. Before I went to Israel, I was raised with the understanding or the thinking that it was a Christian's duty to proselytize and to evangelize. And to a lot of degree, that is the truth. But I did not have an understanding of, when it came to the Jewish people, how the difference it was with that group of people. And so I, just like every other Christian who has this understanding, I was wanting to go to Israel for my own personal pilgrimage to see where, Jesus walked, and all the sites and the history and all of that. Definitely wanted to do that. But I also wanted to go so I could witness to a Jew. And this was before I went to Israel. This was the thinking I was raised with. Okay. So
we were all there.
I know. So if you're a Jewish person listening to this, just let me say, I'm so sorry. That doesn't happen. I'm a different person. That's not me anymore, but that was my understanding. Misguided for sure. But so I went to Israel. And of course, when I got there, my life was changed. Just the experience, there's no place like it. Well, we were about over halfway finished with our tour, and it was on our last day in Jerusalem. What I'm about to tell you is my defining moment of when I changed and what caused me to change my perspective about trying to evangelize the Jewish people. When I woke up on our last morning in Jerusalem and was told that we were leaving town right after breakfast, 9 a.m., I realized that I had not had a chance to go put my prayers in the wall at the hotel, prayers that people had sent with me on pieces of paper that I was hearing people's prayers, and I had never had a chance. It was such a fast-paced trip, So the only chance I had to do that, I could not leave Jerusalem without going to the hotel and spending time to pray and put the prayers in the wall. I just couldn't do that. The only chance I had to do that was before breakfast, and that was it that morning. So I got up super early, and I was out the door at 6 o'clock by myself. First time there, in Israel, thought I didn't have a choice. So I was out the door at 6 a.m., got onto the sidewalk, started raining, and I had learned by then that rain was a blessing,
Amen.
according to the Jewish people. And it was a light rain, so I thought that was a good sign. And I did not really know how to get to where I was going, but I knew the direction. So I walked from the hotel to the old city, which was not far. But once I get into the old city, it was so early in the morning that everything was closed. And if you've been into the old city, the alleyways, the side streets, it's very easy to get lost if you don't know where you're going. And I certainly did not know where I was going. And it was a little bit eerie because it was dark still. And like I said, it was closed. All the shops were closed. There wasn't a soul in sight. And I was watching the clock, and I got nervous. I thought, I'm going to get lost. And what if I end up in an area that's not so great? And so I started praying, and I asked the Lord to please send me some help. And before I could even finish praying, I opened my eyes, and here comes this little Jewish man walking up to me, and he said, "Hello, are you looking for the hotel? Follow me, I'll show you."
An angel.
God sent me a Jewish angel, yes. And I was like, yes, I am. So we had a few minutes to walk. He said, "Come with me." So I'm like, I'm going. And, at that point in time, I had been studying the Bible for a long time, many, many years, and had been a Christian. And I thought I knew the Bible. And he started talking immediately and engaging me in the Bible. And he stopped at one point and he said, are you a Christian? And I said, yes. He said, okay, I'm a Jew. I'm not a Christian. He said, are you going to tell me about Jesus? And in that moment, I thought to myself, that's the whole reason I'm here. But I knew at that moment in time that I do not say a word. And I said to him, no, I'm not going to tell you about Jesus. He said, okay, then we can be friends. And I'm like, okay. And that conversation lasted maybe a minute. And so he felt comfortable. And I realized in that moment, I had it wrong. I had it wrong. Because I'll tell you why I knew. He confirmed it a few minutes later. He said, come this way. And as we walked and talked, he just talked about the Bible. And I realized, I don't know my Bible. He was saying things that total stranger, engaging me in the Bible. God was all over this man. You can see it. And so we walked and walked and walked. And we finally got to a place right before you go down to the hotel, to the plaza, there's a lookout spot. And he brought me right there, and he looked at me, and then he looked toward the Temple Mount, and he pointed, and in a very hushed whisper, he said, there, right there is where the Messiah is going to come very soon. And we pray every day for it. We can't wait. And he was just so excited. My mouth was wide open. I was like, and in that moment, I've been changed. I knew that the Jewish people had the vision. God is with them. They are God's people. And I was so humbled. I just had to turn, and I just gave God a big thank you for letting me see his heart, which is his people, the apple of his eye, and to have that very special moment. And that was it. That was, I was never the same. There's many other stories, but to end that, I was able to go down to the hotel, say my prayers, and make it back to the hotel on time. And all was well, but it was a divine meeting. It was an angel. God sent me a Jewish angel, and I'll never forget that day. I've never been the same. So that
Lori,
was
isn't it sweet how the Lord brought you a sweet, beautiful Jewish angel to teach you in a loving way? I mean, because when we grow up, we're taught, everybody's got to know Jesus. That's how we love everybody. You got to know Jesus. And we come to that realization that Christ means Messiah, and our Jewish friends believe in the Messiah just like we believe, but there's a little difference in what's going on here. Yeah. But I'm like you. I've just learned to keep my mouth shut because my Jewish friends know a lot more about the Bible than I do. And I still love Jesus, but I don't proselytize. I am trying to learn more from them. Yes. I'm not here to teach them anything.
Right. So. I'm with you, Mike. We're on the same page. And I've heard someone else say, I didn't coin this phrase, but it's so true for myself, which is the Jewish people in my life have made me a better Christian. And they deepened my faith. They've shown me so much. I've learned so much from them. I'll tell you another shift in my understanding, because it's been a process. That wasn't the first. That was the first. That wasn't the last. It's an ongoing process, right? And so another shift in my understanding about the Jewish people being a unique people group, that they are fine. Two things. Jeremy Gimpel, I heard him one time speaking. He said, that bracelets that Christians wear, WWJD, what would Jesus do? He said, we have the tzitzit. He said, we're good. God is with us. He said, we're good. The tzitzit are our WWJD bracelet.
Yeah.
But this other shift in my understanding came whenever I began to study the word holy. And this has been a very, very eye-opening thing for me. The word holy means set apart. Well, the Jewish people are set apart from every other people group. They are in covenant with God. Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, they're set apart. We don't need to worry about them. They're totally in covenant with their father. Would you throw your kids away? No, you wouldn't. Neither is God. Those are his kids, and we are lucky and grateful to be grafted into that family.
Amen.
So that whole thing got put to rest, and I'm a different person. And so now I look forward to more opportunities.
And we're grabbing hold to those teachings.
We're grabbing hold. Zechariah 8. Yes, we are.
Because those people know God.
They know God. Yes. Zechariah chapter 8. That's so true. Yes. And I'll tell you, there's been so many stories. I can go on and on. We don't have a lot of time today. That was the defining moment for me when it comes to the Jewish people. And since I've had a peek into that world, I just can't get enough. I just love learning.
Well, Lori, can I ask you a question? Now tell me, how did you start your wonderful nonprofit to teach people how to go to Israel and eat and drink and be merry? And how did that all happen?
Oh my gosh, the Jewish people. So on my first trip to Israel, because I am in the food and wine industry, I see everything through a lens of food and wine, especially when I travel. My whole goal is to eat the local food and learn the cuisine and all of that. Yeah. So on my first trip, when I saw what I saw, because a few nights I would skip the hotel buffets and I would go out to the local restaurants. When I saw the food in Tel Aviv and then in Jerusalem in the restaurant, I could not believe it. I was in shock. To my ignorance, I had no idea how modern the country was and how alive and thriving and family oriented, and everything's about food. Everything biblical, secular, everything's around food. And so by the end of that first trip, I was so smitten with the people, the culture, the food, the wine. I realized that when you are drinking wine or eating food in Israel that's grown there, you're eating prophecy. Amos 9 says, I will return my people back to their land, restore their wasted villages, and once again plant vineyards, and the mountains will drip with sweet wine. I was witnessing with my own eyeballs. I couldn't believe I was witnessing prophecy. So prophecy Amen. In Israel is edible. So put that, in my face evidence with my love of food and wine, I asked the Lord to let me go back and serve the people of Israel some way. So that's how in my heart was born A Taste of Israel, doing food and wine tours to Israel, to bring people over, to go into the vineyards, touch the vine, touch prophecy, drink the wine, sit with and learn from the Jewish people how food plays a central role in spiritual and everything, and just enjoy the food. There's a rabbi that says, when you go buy fruit and vegetables in Shuk, you're buying prophecy.
Amen.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful, So that's how that started.
I've heard that from Moshe Kopinski.
Really? Wow.
He when he gets a group in his store, the little tomato that we eat, those were made in Israel. He talks about how they're so smart. They've done all this, but we're eating prophecy.
It's so true. And so I came back and I started, and I also blog right now, it's 2021. So our travel is not quite back yet to Israel, but I hear the airport's opening. So soon. But I also blog about the food and wine of Israel and the spiritual connection it has and the people. And I've learned so much from the Jewish people about like the spirituality of bread, just bread alone. We talk about that for a long time, right? And so, so it's an amazing country. And we were actually, we helped plan the last group I brought to Israel on a food and wine tour. We went out to Jeremy and Ari's farm, our goat farm, and we helped plant a vineyard.
Oh, wow.
You talk about being part of the Bible. Okay, that's biblical living.
Amen.
But it's real, it's tangible, it's not some mystical thing, It's so powerful. So powerful.
That's a great story.
So let's get a trip going. I'm ready. Are you ready? Let's go.
Amen. I'm to eat and drink and be merry.
Yes. So that's really our stories, and I'm so honored to share and humbled to share how my life has changed. And from there, I'm like you, Mike. I also started studying what Christians call the Old Testament, but it's not old. It's the original. And so I've learned so much more, and it's just been the joy of my life. And I'm grateful to be in this place with these amazing people.
Well, and it's amazing how I'm trying to remember how I met Ann Stacy, and then how this collaboration, because I live up in the top of Texas, you live in Austin, and Ann lives in Fort Worth, outside Fort Worth. And so isn't it amazing how God has blessed us? All these great Jews from Israel come and want to be in Texas. And so you've hosted all these great people. And, I've had all kinds of great people come to the Panhandle, Amarillo. And then, we always seem to, you've done great meals for us. When Joshua, Aaron came and just, it's just amazing kind of what's going on. So I think this Zoom meeting is another God thing that is letting us tell the world that, come on, join us, come and meet our Jewish friends.
Yes.
And then the main thing we want you to do is you got to go to Israel. There's so many people that they've never gone to Israel. And, this year has been horrible with the COVID, but it's opening up. So there's no time like the present to start planning. So
we are, and God willing, I'm going to be in the land soon because I'm going to be meeting with vendors to plan the next trip, because we're hoping to be able to do a Just Among Friends tour in the near future, whenever that's going to be possible, but there's planning to be done. But I just want to take this opportunity to tag on to what you just said, Mike. So if you're listening to this, friends, please stay with us, because we have an amazing lineup of speakers coming up. We've got speakers lined up all the way through the beginning of the fall. So we have a lot to share with you. We're not the only crazy people here. There's a lot of us, and we want to grow that circle, because I've had friends tell me, Lori, you're obsessed with the Jewish people. I'm like, yes, I am. And so is God.
Amen.
And there's a reason why. It's a good reason. It's a life-giving reason. So stay with us, friends. We have a lot more for you. We're excited about this journey that we're on to grow our circle of friends and to love the Jewish people. just like we would love any good friends. There's a reason for this. So Mike, I am at the end. I don't have any other questions for you today. Thank you for taking time to share with us and our viewers your story. I love being.
Thank you, Lori.
This is a fun journey.
This is great.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Just Among Friends. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.